items for your information for your journey and still you bullshit and try to hurt me. Life's tough
when you're an NPC.
Life's rough
when you depend on...
Welcome everybody back to the world of Steve Jackson Games. The last time that we were here was about a year ago, where we talked about the problem with GURPS. And on today's episode, we're going to be talking about Nomine. Okay, apparently Steve Jackson did a whole bunch of other games. And why not Nomine? I don't know. It's weird. I don't know my Latin. Who knows? GURPS tends to do a good job to overshadow the rest of the work that Steve Jackson Games has put into the role-playing game world, in a similar way that D&D and Magic the Gathering glosses over most of the other things that Wizard of the Coast has done. However, the company that is much more well known for its cash cows, GURPS, and board game card games such as Munchkin, have a decent collection of unique games to give a try. Say what you will about Steve Jackson Games, at least they're diverse. I mean, you have Toon, a game about cartoon characters that looks to be in like kind of a similar animation style to like Who Framed Roger Rabbit. You have Transhuman Space, which is a big sci-fi epic. You have games like Nomine that are basically a gigantic religious game that focuses on angels and demons. It really is a wide variety of games that you can choose from the company that gave us the most modular game, arguably, in existence. Whenever I first pulled out Nomine, I was greatly confused. While the concept of joining archangels and demon princes sounded cool once I read it, the title and the cover put me less in the mind of waging wars and more in the mind of the painfully forced conservative Christian-approved alternatives to role-playing games that always feel just painfully forced no matter what. And you all know the people I'm talking about, not Christianity in general. It's that very small subsect that thinks that, like, Pokemon is a sin, and that pretty much anything that kids enjoy is this great, like, devil's temptation for children to go away from Christ. And so they end up creating these, like, very odd Christian-based games that try to be the exact same thing but a Christian alternative and just come across as painfully forced no matter how devout you are. Luckily, that was not the case. Instead, we have a much more intriguing game about the ideas of good and evil, using religious ideology as a theme. In Nomine, you take on the role either as angels, demons, or mortal allies, charged with fighting for a demon prince or an archangel, in a never-ending struggle between good and evil. Naturally, some lines get blurred, and ultimately it is up to you to stop whatever evil force the storyteller cooks up. The game undoubtedly takes from Christian ideology. I mean, you could say that about 99% of the games that were created by the West, so say what you will about that, but they do try to add a little bit of diversity in there too, to at least spice up some culture here and there and make it a little bit more engaging for a wide variety of people. The game itself, well, that's one that's a bit of a mixed bag. The premise and system are both in the situation of, you know, I know who this game is made for, and really it might be a small demographic, but it feels a little niche. I know, niche markets are a common critique of mine, so for my own sake and the sake of others, I'm going to, step away from it on this one. I'm not going to talk about it, so just remember that everything that I say, for better or for worse, should be taken with a grain of salt. For starters, this game has the same system as GURPS, and I would assume other Steve Jackson games. You grab your sheet, you grab your 3d6, and then you proceed to crunch those sweet, sweet numbers in great forms of math. Say what you will about Steve Jackson games, good, bad, worse, who knows. A common critique, though, is that they are very math-heavy. I mean, the book even says in its pages that it gives almost a warning that the game shouldn't just be about math and be about role-playing. So, I mean, that's about as much of a confession as I need. Apparently, Steve Jackson games tend to fall into about a 6 on the leading edge scale of math and gaming, just behind Pathfinder and Shadowrun. And I have always been in the camp that if your gaming system is such that you cannot do the equations easily in your head after you are very familiar with the game, you might need a little bit of simplification. I will hand the game this, though. Unlike GURPS, in which you have to factor in all variables to create your world around you and more, Nomine grounds itself into a world and does some streamlining on the process that makes it a much more fluid style of gameplay. As far as the setting is concerned, it's a mix between fun and bland. The concept of angels and demons is a cool one, especially if you are even remotely interested in a powerhouse version of Christian ideology. However, beyond that, there really isn't much there. So, for frame of reference, let's talk about another game that uses the idea of angels and demons, in my opinion, to be a much better use of the mythos that you're creating around. Demon the Fallen. Game that I've reviewed before. Demon the Fallen is a game that takes from Christian ideology of angels and demons and twists it and works it into its own story. It engages the audience in a way, because what it does is it takes these concepts that people are very familiar with, angels and demons, and crafts an entirely different story, basically. It paints demons as very sympathetic creatures that have had a long line of suffering. It certainly builds up that, demons are not just Lucifer's minions. They were people that opposed God for what was essentially, in the most literal sense, human rights. And they were cast into the abyss for it, and since then they've been able to escape onto the human plane of existence. It's very engaging, and while this one goes into a gray area and the other one not so much, it certainly is a much more compelling game. You get more invested into Demon than you would with Nomine. And for this game, Nomine, it doesn't do a bad job, per se. It just doesn't do that great of a job. It doesn't go the extra mile, so to speak. I know some might hound me for a comparative analysis on this, but damn it, that is the case of the RPG world. If there are two demon/angel games out there, and one is better than the other, it will be the one picked up by gamers of the world. Nomine provides a story of angels versus demons, or good versus evil, in a much more broader sense, and they use that point to drive their entire game's selling point, which is the concept of angels versus demons, good versus evil, and that can work as a selling point. But it just makes it fall all the flatter when you have a game like Demon the Fallen, let's say, on store shelves that does not really offer a good versus evil narrative, but certainly makes the idea more engaging of an experience than the other one. So, where does this game land? I mean, on the one hand, the game isn't bad. It's not stellar, but it's not bad. And really, it does have a bit of a charm to it. I mean, especially in the artwork, which, from what I've seen of Steve Jackson games, tends to be really good. On the other hand, I did just compare it to Demon the Fallen, a game that I gave a miss to a long time ago, and the comparison was favorably towards Demon the Fallen. Similar to Demon the Fallen, it weighs on that fine edge between a crit or a miss, and really hard to decide on which side it falls into. But because I think that Demon the Fallen is a better game, and Demon the Fallen just barely edged into the miss category, this game is also getting a miss. Wrong, this game does have its charm. However, unlike GURPS that provides the true modular experience and has become iconic to the gaming community, this game is locking you into an okay world with a math-heavy system. While it can be fun, I simply cannot recommend it fully. Thank you all so much for watching. Please tune in next week for another episode of Crit or Miss, and also please go to Patreon as well and follow us there. Thank you so much.